In 264 BC, Rome had no navy. Not a small navy. Not an outdated navy. No navy. 0 ships capable of fleet engagement. The Mediterranean was controlled entirely by Carthage, 300 years of naval dominance, the most sophisticated fleet in the ancient world, harbor infrastructure so advanced that Roman ambassadors who visited it had no Latin words for what they were seeing. Rome was a land power. The most effective land army in the ancient world. But land was not the Mediterranean, and the Mediterranean was where Carthage lived, and Carthage had something Rome wanted. Sicily. The island at the center of everything. Carthage's harbor at home contained 220 ship sheds arranged in a circular military harbor, each shed designed for rapid deployment. 3 centuries of accumulated naval engineering. Rome looked at this and decided to go to war with it anyway. That decision tells you everything you need to know about Rome. The Roman Senate deadlocked on the Sicily question, half knowing that war with Carthage meant naval war, and Rome had no navy, the other half knowing that Carthage consolidating Messana meant Carthaginian proximity to Italy permanently. The Senate passed the decision to the Assembly. The Assembly voted yes. The Assembly always voted yes for war and plunder. Messana was held by the Mamertines, mercenaries who had seized it, murdered its male population, and held it illegally for 20 years. When threatened by Syracuse, they appealed to both Rome and Carthage simultaneously. Carthage moved first. A Carthaginian garrison entered the city. Rome decided this was unacceptable and sailed to Sicily. A Carthaginian quinquereme ran aground on the Italian coast during the war's opening phase. The Romans found it. They took it apart. They studied every joint and measurement. And while Carthaginian shipwrights had spent generations learning to build these vessels, Rome replicated the design in 60 days and began constructing a fleet of 120 warships. They had never built a warship before. They built 120. The Roman solution to having no sailing experience was characteristically Roman, training frames on dry land. Men learning to row on benches in a field, practicing synchronized strokes in open air while their ships were still being built on the shore behind them. Rome was training its navy on land. The ships were not finished yet. The corvus. A boarding bridge on a pole at each ship's prow, tipped with an iron spike in the shape of a crow's beak. When an enemy ship came alongside, the corvus dropped, the spike drove into the deck, the ships locked together, and the naval battle became an infantry battle. Rome had turned sea warfare into land warfare. Carthage had no answer for it. At Mylae in 260 BC, the Roman consul Gaius Duilius used the corvus against the Carthaginian fleet and won Rome's first naval victory. The Carthaginian admiral had not expected to be boarded. He had deployed for the standard outflanking maneuver that had won Carthaginian battles for 3 centuries. He found his ships locked to Roman warships by iron crow's beak spikes while Roman infantry crossed boarding bridges onto his decks. The Carthaginian navy understood naval warfare completely. What they did not understand was that Rome had decided to make naval warfare irrelevant and replace it with infantry combat at sea. The distinction proved decisive. The war escalated. Both sides committed more ships, more men, more resources. By 256 BC, the Battle of Cape Ecnomus saw approximately 650 ships and 300,000 men engaged in a single naval battle, the largest naval engagement in ancient history. Rome won. The momentum was building. Rome invaded North Africa. Roman legions landed on the African coast below Carthage. For the first time in history, Roman soldiers touched African soil. The invasion began successfully, villages taken, territory seized, Carthage under pressure. Rome's consul sent an arrogant demand to the Carthaginian government. Carthage hired a mercenary. Xanthippus was a Spartan. He looked at the Carthaginian army, identified exactly how it had been fighting incorrectly against Roman infantry, redesigned the deployment of the elephants and cavalry, and took the reorganized force into the field. At the Battle of Tunis, Xanthippus destroyed the Roman army. The elephants broke the Roman formations from the front. The cavalry destroyed the flanks. Approximately 2,000 Romans survived out of 15,000. The consul who had sent the arrogant demand was captured. Rome's North African invasion was over. The war was continuing. Here is the fact nobody tells you about the First Punic War. In 23 years of the most consequential naval conflict in ancient history, the single largest cause of Roman military casualties was the weather. In 255 BC, a Roman fleet returning from North Africa was caught in a Mediterranean storm off Sicily and lost approximately 280 ships and 100,000 men. In a single storm. Not a battle. Not an ambush. A summer storm that the fleet was sailing too late in the season to avoid. 100,000 men. One storm. Rome rebuilt the fleet. Rome rebuilt the fleet after the storm of 255 BC. Then a Roman admiral made a navigational decision that put the next fleet onto a rocky coast. Rome rebuilt that fleet too. Then the rebuilt fleet was lost to another storm. Rome rebuilt again. The institutional capacity to absorb catastrophic loss and continue building is the most important military capability Rome possessed in this war. Carthage kept expecting Rome to stop rebuilding. Rome kept rebuilding. The captured Roman consul was sent to Rome by Carthage to negotiate peace terms or a prisoner exchange. He arrived in Rome, appeared before the Senate, delivered his assessment of the situation, and told the Senate to reject the peace terms. Then he went back to Carthage. He had told the Senate his honor required him to return. He returned. What Carthage did to him afterward is in the historical record. He is one of the most extraordinary figures the First Punic War produced. In Sicily, Hamilcar Barca arrived in 247 BC and established a mountain stronghold at Eryx. From Eryx he conducted 9 years of guerrilla warfare, raids, ambushes, mobile strikes against Roman positions throughout western Sicily. Hamilcar was a brilliant commander with insufficient resources operating in a war whose strategic outcome would be decided at sea rather than on his mountain. He knew this. He fought his mountain campaign anyway. He kept fighting until the war ended. Hamilcar Barca is the most consequential figure of the First Punic War who did not determine its outcome. He was undefeated in Sicily. He returned to Carthage when the peace was signed. He would spend the next decade rebuilding Carthaginian power in Spain. He brought his son with him. The son's name was Hannibal. By 242 BC, both sides were exhausted. Rome's public treasury was depleted. Rome's private citizens were asked to fund the final fleet personally. They would be repaid from war prizes if Rome won. They would lose their investment if Rome lost. The wealthy Romans of 242 BC financed the war's final year from private funds. They bet on Rome. They were correct. The final fleet built from private Roman money was constructed to a higher standard than any previous Roman fleet. The private funders had demanded it. The ships were better. The crews were trained sailors, not soldiers learning on land. The fleet that went to the Aegates Islands in 241 BC was the best fleet Rome had ever put to sea. The Battle of the Aegates Islands, March 10, 241 BC. The Roman fleet intercepted a Carthaginian supply fleet attempting to resupply the besieged Sicilian garrisons. The Carthaginian ships were laden with supplies, lower in the water, slower, their sails up in a wind that had turned against them. The Roman fleet was battle-ready, oars deployed, moving with the efficiency of a force that had spent a year preparing for this one engagement. The corvus deployed. The Iron Crow's beak spikes drove into the Carthaginian decks. The supply fleet, not a war fleet, not trained for boarding defense, was taken ship by ship. 120 Carthaginian vessels captured or sunk. The Sicilian garrisons cut off from supply. The war was over. Carthage received the Aegates report in the Senate chamber that had been conducting this war for 23 years. The treasury was empty. The Sicilian garrisons were isolated. The fleet was gone. The calculation produced one answer. The war had to end. Hamilcar Barca on his Eryx mountain received the order to negotiate. The sharp, brilliant commander's face received the news that 9 years of undefeated guerrilla warfare had not changed. He accepted the order. He negotiated. The terms: Carthage leaves Sicily, pays an indemnity, releases prisoners. Hamilcar obeyed the terms. He went back to Carthage. He did not forget. The peace terms of 241 BC were the foundation of the Second Punic War. Carthage paid the indemnity. Carthage left Sicily. Hamilcar went to Spain, built a Carthaginian empire there, trained an army, and prepared his son Hannibal for what he considered an unfinished conflict. The First Punic War ended in 241. The second began in 218. The seeds were planted in the peace. Rome received Sicily as its first overseas province. The first territory outside the Italian peninsula administered as Roman territory. The first step toward an empire that would eventually control the entire Mediterranean basin. It began with mercenaries who murdered a city's population in 288 BC and held it illegally for 24 years. The Mamertines who caused this entire 23-year war by appealing to both Rome and Carthage simultaneously are not in any history textbook. They started the conflict that changed the ancient world. They are a footnote. The footnote that contains everything. Rome rebuilt its fleet 4 times. Lost more men to storms than to Carthage. Funded the final year from private citizens' personal money. And won. That sequence tells you what Rome was. The Corvus. An iron crow's beak on a wooden boarding bridge. Rome's most important military innovation of the First Punic War. It had nothing to do with naval expertise. It had everything to do with identifying the gap between what Rome could do and what the enemy could do, and building a device that closed that gap by changing the nature of the engagement entirely. Rome could not win a naval battle. So Rome made naval battles into infantry battles. That is the Roman solution applied to every problem the Republic encountered. Change the terms of the problem until the terms favor Rome, then execute on the new terms with the institutional efficiency that is the Republic's primary capability. The storm of 255 BC killed more Roman soldiers than any single Carthaginian military action in the war. 100,000 men in one Mediterranean summer storm. Rome's response to losing 100,000 men in a single event was to build another fleet. The response to the second lost fleet was to build another fleet. The response to the third was identical. Rome's tolerance for catastrophic loss was the weapon that won this war. Hamilcar Barca is the war's great tragedy. 9 years undefeated on an Eryx mountain, conducting a brilliant guerrilla campaign that could not affect the strategic outcome of a war decided at sea. Brilliant commander, insufficient resources, watching the war end in a way his mountain campaign could not prevent. He brought his son home from Spain. The son was watching everything. The private Roman citizens who funded the final fleet bet their personal fortunes on Rome's ability to win one more naval battle. They had watched Rome lose fleets to storms, to Carthaginian warships, to Roman navigational error. They funded the fleet anyway. The bet paid. The Aegates' victory repaid them. The institutional confidence of wealthy Romans in their own state's capacity to win is one of the war's most under-examined facts. 241 BC. Rome's first province. Carthage's first major strategic defeat. Hamilcar's first journey to Spain. Hannibal's first military education. The Aegates Islands in March, an iron crow's beak in a laden supply ship's deck, 120 ships captured or sunk, and a 23-year war reduced to a peace treaty that neither side believed was permanent. The second war was always coming. The first war made it inevitable. And this was only part 1.